was a TV series based off of the Italian comic book series of the same name. It ran from 2004 to 2006 and covered the first 2 arcs of the comic book. As for this video, I will just be covering the main characters, as in the 5 characters that compose Witch, a few of their supporting cast, the main villains, and some of the supporting villains. The show is a first in that we're dealing with a group of characters that primarily wear a uniform. So in the case of Color and Conveyance, they will be sharing marks. What's going to separate each individual is their characterization. Now, the Guardians themselves share the same color palette in their outfits. That gets rearranged for each of the characters. While technically a solid complementary scheme, I think it can get a bit garish in some shots, but I eventually got used to it. B+ is going to stick there for a while. Their costumes, strangely enough, resembles that of a fairy, which mixes well with the color selection, yet I cannot help but think that they could have been individualized a bit more than just reflecting their average attire. Like maybe have some tertiary color that reflects their element. What, too much like Winx, Bionicle, Avatar, and other shows? Perhaps they share this design trope because it kind of works. While the team uniform is effective, it does drown out their individual personalities a little too much, so I'll just give it a solid B. They also have a significant amount of variant designs for both clothing and the outfit for their new power design, which unfortunately is only exclusive to the comics. In the case of the new power designs, they do accentuate the elements of the costumes that make the team members unique, in which case they collectively get an A for the variant bonus. That'll do it for the shared scores. Now on to their individual scores. Wilhelmina is the de facto leader of the Guardians, and she actually fills the role, taking initiative and can come up with plans in a pinch. She also has a connection to the strange world of Meridian, and her relation to Phobos is a point of intrigue for the series. But Shoop, isn't that other person? No, we're not doing that. That's a spoiler character. Ability-wise, she is in charge of the MacGuffin that allows the group to transform into their outfits. She can also use it to seal portals that bridge Earth and Meridian. Apparently in the comic, she can also use an energy called Quintessence. Unfortunately, during the first season, she does not have these powers. However, she does gain a similar power during the second season. A- for the characterization, and for her overall score. I think she's a solid leader and a good character. At least that's what I saw while sampling the series. Before I go into Irma's character, I want to discuss her elemental power and what that actually tends to symbolize for her character. She herself has water. Now, water can be calm like a lake or devastating like a tsunami. They tend to be the most calm and collected of the group. Irma, however, is a more playful take on the element. She is the wittiest of the group, not only being the comic relief, but also being a secondary leader when Will does not. Her characterization is a B and her overall is a B+. She's entertaining, but not as interesting as Will. Nothing says I'm timid and reserved like fire powers, am I right? To be fair, Tarani gets more and more confident as the series goes on, so I'll concede that she's a fairly solid character. She's on par with Irma and gets a B+ in characterization and overall score. Cornelia is not that far from being an Earth-type person. Apparently, in the comics, she was more calm and down to earth, so to speak. However, in the show, her personality is a bit more vain, which can be a tad annoying at times. For that lack of character integrity, I will put her characterization down to a C+, which brings her overall score to a B. In the first episode of the show, Hey Lin is actually the first of the group to be seen, so at the beginning I thought that she was going to be the main character. I was wrong. That said, she is definitely a fit for air, being free-spirited and occasionally absent-minded. I do also like her dynamic with her grandmother. Pity we don't see it as often as I'd like to. In truth, she doesn't get as much exposure on her own, at least from what I've seen. As it is, her characterization is a B- and her overall score is a B+. And that'll do it for the main Guardian. Caleb is the sole guy and a fish out of water. He's from Meridian and often tags along with the Guardians when trouble's afoot. Color-wise, he's a lot like late 2000s video games. Monochromatic brown. A C. Give us something a little more than just brown. I know that he's a rebel leader and they're probably not well funded, but have something a little more impactful than a brown coat and pants. Give him a brightly colored scarf or something to accessorize. Anything to give his normal outfit more personality than roguish guy. Conveyance gets a B-. I mean, the coat's still pretty cool. During the first season, which the majority of my research covered, he generally filled two roles. Either he gets into trouble, or he helps out with whatever problem of the week he is. Sometimes these two things also happen at the same time. He also does generally engage in rebellion work when the plot calls for it. Other times, and especially early in the show, he's just working for Haylen's grandmother. Strangely, he also plays the straight man to the more quirky Guardians. Even stranger given his voice actor. It should also be of note that by the second season, he also has a relationship with Irma, which is kind of on and off. Overall, he's an okay character. I'll give his characterization a B+. He does have some minor clothing variations, but they don't really stand out as much as the girls. His variant bonus is a B, which only brings him to a B-. They should have stuck with something more like the comic design. Yan Lin, the grandmother of Halen, is also a former Guardian. As it is, she wears a deep green robe with even richer green accents. Simple yet pleasing, so I'll just give that a B. Conveyance-wise, she is indeed Halen's grandmother, which leaves her conveyance as merely a B+. Her characterization, while limited early on, is still crucial. Her knowledge as a former Guardian helps the new group out in many situations early on. Of course, her connection with the second season's villain Nerissa also adds to her importance to the story. So for that alone, she gets an A in characterization. Unfortunately, she doesn't have that much way of variant outfits, so her total is just going to be a B+. This strange goblin by the name of Blunk is the comic relief of the show, and apparently only the show. Blunk's color scheme is nearly a complementary one. His green skin contrasts nicely with the red-orange tunic, with some minor accents that are mainly neutral colors or brown. Strangely solid, B+. As for his conveyance, I don't think that there's any doubt that he's the comic relief. Also, it's kind of a strange take on a goblin, seemingly crossed with a frog. Overall, I'd say it's an interesting design, A-. That said, he's very one-note and can get annoying at times. Give him a C- in characterization, bringing him to a B-. The magical despot of Meridian, Phobos, is the main villain of the first season and technically the main villain of the overall plot, but again, 2 seasons. Color-wise, his robes consist of the ever-classic black and dark red combination. Combine this with a look that takes traits from both Eastern and Western villains, you have the most obviously evil guy since Skeletor. What? I'll give his color scheme an A- and the conveyance a B+. Now, Phobos somewhat suffers from what I will call from here on out Snoke Syndrome. Snoke Syndrome is when an evil tyrant does very little save for sitting on their throne and barking orders at their minions. There are generally two types of the disease. Type A Snoke syndrome is exactly what the name entails. The villain in question has little interaction with the heroes until the climax of the arc, and even then gets wiped out very quickly. Type B is the Ozais of this syndrome, who will actually put up a fight and back up their authority. Lastly, there's the borderline case like Hordak and SKeletor, who actually bother to take matters into their hands. Phobos is somewhere in between Type A and B. During the majority of the first season, he simply issues commands to Cedric and keeps his bum firmly planted on his throne. Though I must give him credit where it's due, he does have a commanding presence. Pity he's rarely ever shown using it to run his kingdom. If anything, it's kind of derelict. C+ for the characterization, and a B for the tone. Now let's see, Cedric's color palette consists of dark greens, desaturated red accents, and yellow-green stripes. Give him a B+ for the colors. It's intriguing, but quite typical, since he's a giant snake dude. If it isn't clear, he's Phobos' right-hand man and the general of his army. Conveyance-wise, I give it an A-. You know that guy's evil. Even in human form, you know he's evil. His characterization in the show leaves much to be desired. While he clearly has some cunning early on, he doesn't give that much of an impression beyond looking like a snake dude. Apparently had a love interest in the comic and got some development, but that's not really present here. During my sampling, I didn't find too many standout moments, so he gets a C for characterization. Also, he gets a B for the variant bonus. After all, he's a shapeshifter, which brings his total to a B. The Tracker. Yeah, that's all I got for this guy. Here's the scores. I'll just show myself out. Nerissa is the big bad of the second season, and more importantly, a former Guardian. Color-wise, her old form has a grayish-blue robe with desaturated purple or teal hair depending on the lighting. A very analogous palette that favors very mystical associated colors. A B+. There is some neutral or contrasting accents. I'd go a little higher. Conveyance is a solid A, no questions. This old lady is magic and a serious threat. We have everything I like in a villain. Being an active player, tremendous magical powers, and generally being competent. Without revealing too much, I'll give her an A in characterization. Given her former Guardian look is important to the story, I'll just give that variant bonus a B as well. Grand total for Nerissa is an A-. Dang good villain. The show itself is fine, both in terms of visuals and writing. However, from what I've gathered, the comic is a more complete experience. Nonetheless, give the show a shot and take a look at it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to cover too much of this one like my previous Design Dungeon episodes. My schedule has been a bit hectic as of late. Nonetheless, Design Dungeon will continue. For the next episode is...